How did you kind of move past that and get yourself in the motion? Because obviously you've been in the thick of creating this album now for so long. You know, that's been your life. Even though, like I said, when we had the last conversation, you were just coming off the back of completing Love Letter, and then you're straight in. You know, have you had a moment to just feel human before having to appreciate everything that comes with that?
I think that's fair. I think right at the end of Love Letter, I, funny enough, left LA. You know, and I it wasn't permanent, but I just wanted to solo travel for a bit because I'd never been able to do that before, and I felt like I was in a place in my life like I could just fuck off, you know? So I went to London for a bit. I went to Vienna, I went to Budapest, and solo travel was really tough, you know? I never thought of myself as someone that could like eat dinner by myself. And I think that's so like shamed out of you when, especially like living in LA. I think it's just weird, right? Like you see that in movies, you see that in TV shows where it's like the joke is like table for one, and they're like, one, like you're just gonna eat by yourself. And I was just like, absolutely not. I rotted in like my hotel room for a long time, and then I think the beauty of that trip was I know what I'm like in my depressive episodes. I know my tendency to isolate and to want to like cut myself off from everyone. I know that if I'm in a different time zone, it's harder for people to, you know, text me to get a response from me.
Naturally.
But when you're here and you do that, when you're home, you can only do that for so many days before you kind of do the same bullshit you do when you're lonely, and you get sucked right back into life. I used to say this a lot, but I always knew what like day 8, day 9 was of being lonely. You know, I knew, unfortunately, like the people I would text or the cycles I would fall back into. I knew just my relationship with alcohol at the time and whatnot. I didn't know what day 10 was like, you know, and being in Budapest and hitting day 10, hitting day 11, it was like I forced myself to go through that. I allowed myself to go through that episode, and then I got tired of it, you know? And I thought there was something really nice about tiring myself out and just wanting to get up.
Yeah.
Be like, I need fresh air. I need a walk. I need to get out of this hotel room. And then I started eating dinner by myself, you know? And at first I thought like I looked really strange, and maybe it was like where I was at, but nobody looked at me crazy. You know, I think I forced myself to confront a lot of things that I had been going through, but also to just find a little bit of peace within myself. And I really think that trip like changed my life in so many ways.
I think that's like the beauty of a different type of loneliness. You know, it's a type of solitude that you've chosen to take, but in a positive way. You know, you're shifting your perspective by putting yourself into a new environment and seeing what that has to offer you. And obviously, you know, it's paid dividends for where you're at now and how you've been able to just change the narrative for yourself. And obviously within that, like I say, 2 years has flown by and so much has happened in that time, especially like for yourself. And, you know, recently you took the step to really open up to everyone and to allow the world to know what you've been going through in terms of like your mental health and medication, you know, and obviously that was a major, major moment for you to open up in that way, you know, outside of just what you put into the music. And do you feel like you wouldn't have been able to do that without taking that time out and putting yourself into new environments and challenging yourself?
Yeah, 100%. I think everything compounded in that way. I've known that I struggle with bipolar for years now, you know. I think I even knew back in like 2020, and it was unfortunate at the time for it to be shut down by someone I confided in, and you know, I kind of lied to myself for a bit that maybe I'm not. I went through that fun roller coaster. I think every album, it was more obvious that that's what I was going through.
Yeah.
But 2023 was just, it was tough. You know, Love Letter was a crash in a way that I had never felt before. And I had to force myself to travel, and I came back from the travel, and I felt like I found, I don't know, just being a young adult and being a young man, a lot of that is like, who am I really? What does it mean to be a man? Like, what is my place in the world? I came back, I was going through it, and you know, I lived in Hollywood for a little bit, and I just on a whim, like, dyed my hair blonde, like extremely white.
I recall.
Yeah, it was truly like he's just going through a phase right now, and yeah, completely dyed my hair white, and the next day flew to like a tiny island outside of Vancouver, and Kisiko and I started just working on some like early demos, and we were finishing up Love Always, kind of thinking about what's next, and I guess like unofficially in that way started this rollout. You know, like I've been blonde since, but that summer was a really interesting one because I came back from Vancouver and I had to deal with real life. You know, I think for months I was just trying to escape it wherever I could. Tried to just dive into another album, just like bury my head in work or whatever I could. I started just like losing people around me, a lot of things, a lot of major life changes. And I think I had to go through all of that to reach a point where it just felt like I am an adult. There's no reason for me to not take accountability. There's no reason for me to not be responsible.
Yeah.
You know, like it's the whole Pete Davidson thing where it's like mental illness doesn't give you an excuse to be an asshole.
Absolutely.
You know, and I believe that, like, as someone who to this day goes through it and surrounds myself with people who are either understand it or are very empathetic. I do think that like part of being an adult and part of just being a decent human being in society is like, you gotta get your shit together.
Absolutely.
You know, you gotta, to whatever extent that you can. You know, it is an uphill battle, but I think it's the effort that counts, and medication was the first step in that. At least, you know, I'd tried years of other things. Felt like the right time. I talked to my family. Not everyone was on board. Talked to my psychiatrist. I leaned on a lot of people. That early transition wasn't an easy one. The first couple months of medicine, I think, really took a toll on me.
You have to dig in. I remember this is something that we spoke about, how you've really just got to dig your heels in and sometimes let it swallow you whole to come back out the other end. And,
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
grow from that and feel stronger within yourself.
Yeah. I think that's how I would describe that journey. You know, it was, you know, they always say with medication, like it's supposed to feel worse before it gets better, and I promise you it felt worse. Like it was a couple months of just, I have to embrace that this is a decision I'm making. This is better for me in the long run. And yeah, being able to look back at it a year and a half, you know, a year and a half ago, and
Really puts things into perspective.
Puts it
in
into
a way,
perspective.
Yeah.
Because I really do think I'm the most stable version of myself. You know, it's hard to remember like my teenage years, but I think from the things I remember, like I wasn't a very stable person. I do find myself pretty grounded, even in moments like this where I don't feel fully present. I do think that I'm grounded. I'm more at peace in a lot of ways. But it's nuanced, right? There's a trade-off, and I couldn't have prepared for the trade-off until getting to this side of it, you know? And I don't even want to say this side of it as if like, you know, I've reached a place and like this is it and I'm good.
It's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably a lifelong one, you know? It's probably something that I continue to wrestle with. Like my frontal lobe hasn't developed yet, you know? We'll see what that does. You know, major things happen in life and we'll have to see how that affects me. But I look back at it and I'm very proud of myself for making that decision. And it's not a decision for everybody. You know, I have really good friends that, you know, going through the same thing or have tried medication, it doesn't work. You know, it's not like it's a one size fits all in any way. But I think it was the right decision for me. And I think now I'm at a place in my life where I'm trying to navigate. So my brain chemistry is very different now, you know? And it's a new set of challenges that I find myself dealing with. And if I knew how to, I would try to move forward in that direction. But I think that's kind of the beauty of like, at least when you look at it from a project perspective, that's the beauty of like letting an album cycle play out, you know? You don't know the story until you've lived enough to look back and be like, that's the story. Or maybe I'm still living it, but like that's the starting point. You know, like this is what I potentially see as the arc. And that gets a little scary because then you start to be like, okay, well, like, you know, I'm starting at this point, we're going through this, we're gonna like hit this low here, and then like it should end right here. And so you can't predict your own life to be like, well, I should end at this place if your life was never meant to be a punishment. I fucking hope that like I end up feeling something like that. But it's a really interesting process when creating and just trying to live and be human and grow up as an adult. And
it's very easy to lose sight of because, you know, you're just in this muddle of life and you're moving in the direction that you're used to moving, and then when something comes along and forces you to change direction and just look at everything from a different perspective, you're suddenly like just thrown in the mud a little bit, and that's for you to figure out. And it takes me back to the conversation we had after Love Letter came out and how we ended that conversation, which was, you know, really looking forward towards what the next project would be. And what you've just said then, it's super easy to get yourself in that space and think, okay, this is what it's going to be, this is what I'm wanting to work towards. But then life happens and you're having to shift gears. Do you feel like that's something that you had to do?
Yeah. I mean, that conversation was so exciting because I knew that Love Always was next, you know, and it was like, how do I tell you that we're moving somewhere past Love Letter? It's not all fucking rainbows either, but like there's like a silver lining to all of this. And that Love Always really became what I wanted it to become for the small body of work that it is.
Sure.
But I think it's really interesting to reflect back because it's like, in a way, I think everything we talked about is, and what I set out to do is what I did, you know, and it found its twisted, fucked up way of getting there. But that is like a version of the project that I ended up making, you know. I knew I wanted on some level for it to feel like, you know, is this healing? Is it time for me to let go of all of this? Love Letter was so fucking angsty, you know? I was so angry when I made that record. Like, I was just going through a lot in life, in the industry, you know, feeling exploited, you know, watching my home fall apart. You know, everyone around me at the time didn't even live here. It's a lot of people in LA that are here and then they go back and they get to see their families, and like the holidays would come around and it was just me by myself here, you know. And it was I have always had a really tough relationship with the city for that reason. And when I look back at it, it's like I was 22, I was 21, 22. I was experiencing one of my records have the biggest moment you could ask for, while I'm watching my life fall apart in so many ways, while I feel like there's nobody around me. And when there's nobody around you, you feel you can see the vultures circling. You can see how nasty it gets. And of course there was that angst there, but so much, like, I really feel like I put it all into that record. I feel like Kisco and I felt like we had so much to prove. It was so fuck everyone, fuck the industry, fuck, LA even, which it's like, it's crazy to look back at it and think about that, because it's like I don't feel that way anymore.
Yeah.
And that to me maybe tells me that I did what I needed to with Birds, because the natural next step was like, hey, is it time to let go of this, Is it time to just like let go of this anger towards whoever, or towards the idea of whatever, Is it just time to start looking inward in a way that I haven't before? And I make very introspective music, right? Like it's all about my mental health. It's all rooted in that. I think Love Letter, for the first time, I dug into family. I went places that felt way too vulnerable before that. I felt like I couldn't do that. But I also feel like I spelled out a project for everybody. It was like, this is what happened to me. This is what's happening. It's fucking tragic. And like, I hope you're watching the story. I hope you're listening to the story and you're feeling that. I hope you're feeling the heaviness that I feel. And Birds, I feel like I went into Birds knowing that I am going to tell you this specific story about my journey through the last 2 years, through friends and family and life and mental illness and medication and everything that comes with it. But like I always say, that it's my Inkblot, it's my Rorschach test. Because I think my fans are too smart at this point for me to spoon feed them, and to be like, it's this linear journey down to hell, and
Sure.
like, come on this ride with me. I think Birds is like, I always say this, but it's like, I think it's whatever you need it to be. I hope people took whatever they needed from it. And I hope years from now, like, as people are in a different place in their lives, they're able to have a different perspective on the project, like that was the intention there.
And grow with the music and vice versa, I think, is one of the most beautiful things. I think it also speaks to your journey, because something you spoke on just then about feeling lonely, like displaced when you were making Love Letter, and obviously all of that anger and those feelings came into the music. But it reminded me of the conversation we were having over dinner yesterday with your sister, and you were talking about how important the feeling of home is, and how together you've curated this feeling of a home, and that's something that you always want to share, with your friends, and you've got an incredible circle of friends and people that's supporting you. And I think that speaks to where you've been able to get just by building that space and really putting value into what that means for you and for everybody that's inside of it. I'd love to dig into that.
Yeah, I think Rhea did say it really well last night. We definitely a couple drinks in, and that's when she articulates herself the best. And, beautifully.
Yeah.
When I played her the album, and specifically Punishment, her first thought was, you wrote this album about us losing our home, and that was a tough one. Love Letter really held a special place in her heart. It always will. She's like, it's kind of beautiful that you ended this one saying you'll find your way back home, and everybody knows. And I think that's really speaks to what her and I have had to do to just find our way back to each other and try to rebuild our relationship with, where we come from. And, in the middle of going through a lot, let alone trying, like, even wanting to try to rebuild a home, and that's the thing. I think on some level, when you feel like you've lost your home or the feeling of home, you'll probably spend the rest of your life trying to look for that again. I think you said that really well, whether that's in another country or with certain people, whatever that looks like to you.
It really speaks to the home being more than just a place,
Yeah.
And I think that's the point we were trying to get to when we were speaking about that, is that it's so much more than that. And I think especially what you've demonstrated, it is the people filling those spaces and the memories and experiences that you're sharing, and then what you do with those.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's like, I think there's something very comforting about being able to tell yourself, and in my place, being able to tell the world, to the people that feel like they've lost that they will find their way back. They will find their way to recreating that in whatever that looks like for them. That's something I've never really been able to offer in my music before, and I think about that a lot. I was having a conversation with a good friend recently about punishment specifically, and I told her for like a year I didn't let her hear it until the album was out, and I was like, I want you to know that I'm working on this song and you're very much on my mind as I am, like, and I there's like this playlist we have that we keep sending back and forth to each other, and it's called You're on Your Own, Kid, and it's like the Taylor Swift song, and there's so many songs in that. There's like Fly On by Coldplay and Yellow by Coldplay, and there's just a lot of these records that are like, wow, I really think I'm on my own here. And I told her, I was like, this song to me will always remind me of you, and it's that feeling that I've always been the artist to my fans that is able to comfort them in a really low place. And that's not out of me saying, hey, like, I want to wrap my arms around you. This is just like, this is my subjective experience of what I'm going through. And it's amazing and also really sad that so many people are able to relate to that. But there is this comfort, right? There is this relationship I have with them. And I think a lot of this album was realizing my purpose, and I think tour played a huge role in that, but that I understand my impact on their lives. I understand why they look at me the way they do, or what they look for from me, and to be able to, for the first time, offer something to them that, like, it's like I wrote this song to myself, but I also wrote it to all of my fans, all these people around the world that I love, who have either seen at a show or, hopefully someday will. I want you to leave this album with that feeling that, like, I don't know how and I don't know when, but like you'll be okay. You've kept yourself going so far, and you'll live to fight another day.
Have you been able to really pick apart and digest what it means to be able to offer that to people, and for them to be able to, take those feelings home with them? I mean, like you said, with tour, that's the first time they really get to have that FaceTime in a really meaningful and impactful way, where it's not only the music, but it's also your presence and being able to share a conversation with them and kind of bundle that all together. Have you really kind of accepted the weight of what that means?
I think that's the place I'm at in my life right now, in the struggle that I see right ahead of me. It's a lot to process. It is very heavy. Tour has completely changed my life. and I've 100% realized that this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. You know, and I think Billie Eilish said something like how she wants to be remembered as a touring artist. She wants to be remembered for her shows. And I didn't know what that meant until we started doing them. And, you know, half of it is the show itself. And there's no feeling like that, and there's no feeling like seeing a crowd react to you, seeing their relationship with the music, understanding that this isn't even about me, but I'm here to curate this moment for you and the person that you came with, or if you came by yourself, like, it's your memories attached to the music, right? It's your individual experiences. I'm just a part of that memory, you know? I'm just here to, like, be a soundtrack to that. That's half of it. The other half of it is I do meet and greets, you know? And it's a 90-minute show. It's a 90-minute meet and greet. And, you know, it's a line of just, like, the most beautiful people you'll ever see. You know, just the kindest, sweetest people. That's one thing I take a lot of pride in. There's a lot of really toxic fan bases and
all over the place,
artists who have hilarious fans. I truly believe I have the sweetest fans in the world. It is such an incredible community of people, and a group of people that are so vulnerable, or at least want to be. You know, they take that from me, and they want to give it right back to me. You know, that's something you couldn't ask for. You couldn't pay for something like that. And it's this line of people coming to me, and a lot of it is, you know, them feeling what they feel from me, but the majority of it is what my music has been able to do for them, you know. And it's a beautiful thing to hear somebody tell you that you've saved their life, you know.
Heavy at the same time, though. I think
Extremely
it's
heavy.
important to recognize that, you know, because it's a big give and take at the end of the day.
It's a complicated emotion. And for that to happen over and over again, over the course of, you know, there's the internet, and there's what I've experienced in the last however many years, and seeing that, it's a different thing for a human being to look you in the eyes, or to cry in your arms and open up about the things they've gone through. And for me to have the honor to be able to hear that, for someone to trust me with that.
Yeah.
And it builds, you know. I think it plays in two ways. We're on one end, it is extremely heavy, and I do go home, and I pretty much break down after every show. I think my medication, I always say it's working overtime, because my psychiatrist tells me that it's not a human thing to experience being on stage, let alone then seeing hundreds of people confide in you in that way. And it is tricky, but on the other hand, I think it's really helped me find my purpose in life. You know, I think I started to understand that whether you see it in, like, a religious way or a spiritual way, and I you know, I am whatever I am. I feel like my purpose here is to be that for people. Like, I really feel like it's to heal and to give back to the world, and to take all their pain away as much as I can, and to be able to give them catharsis however I can, to give them that feeling of home in whatever way I can. Yeah, it takes a toll on me, you know. I've seen it fuck with me a lot, but it's one of those things that it's like, it fucks with me, and Lauren sees me after every show, and she's always waiting at the end after Love Letter, which was our finale last year, and I come back and it's just her and I hugging, and she's always crying, and I'm crying, and then and she's seen some bad ones where everyone thought it was an incredible show, and I'm just breaking down. I'm just sobbing because it's a lot to experience, you know. I think I like talk about that on the album in the way that I can, but that is a high that I will chase for the rest of my life. There's no feeling like being on stage, but I'm so scared of feeling anything above what I think my allocated range of emotions are now, because the higher I go, the lower it, you know, I come back down. And I was used to lows before, you know, I was used to lows before medication. My life was just so this, but it was more on the like lower side of things.
Some consistency.
And then I found my way to like brick wall, you know, just like right here, and that's like the stability. And I like missed the feeling of feeling low, which is such a fucked up like masochistic thing to say, that it's like I missed the feeling of just like wanting to go through it. But then when I feel a high and it pushes past that barrier, the low comes, and I'm not equipped to deal with it the way that I was. And that's a really strange thing to say when you say that I'm the healthiest I've ever been. You know, I'm in a good place, I'm stable. But like 3 years ago, this low was super normal for me. Now it hits me, and like I have to just fucking brace for impact, you know? And to say all of that and say, I think that's my purpose, puts me in a really weird place, because I don't know where I go from here, you know? I don't know how I go into the next chapter of my life. Yeah, I could try to be as healthy as possible. I'm in the gym, I'm eating healthier, I'm on top of my shit, I'm around good people. I take care of myself the best I've ever done in my life. But I know the next challenge is one I'm not ready for yet, and I'm going into it head first.
It's like you said, that's you taking accountability, and that's something you have to do as, not only as a man, but just as a human. You have to be willing to look yourself in the eyes and say, you know, the challenge lays ahead, but I'm going to run at that. And I'm going to take whatever it gives me, because that's the lessons that you're then going to carry forward and keep running through that cycle. You know, as much as you say it's strange and maybe difficult to say out loud that those lows sometimes were, you know, almost easier, it's because you've gone through it so many times, and at least it's become predictable. You know, it's like predictable programming, whereas now when you're in this new cycle of where you are medicated and you're still having to figure that out, and you're also having to figure out touring and having to give so much more to people outside of just producing music, you're figuring that out. And as we said before, it's a marathon, not a sprint. You know, you can't expect yourself to have those answers straight away. But when it comes to the next year or the next 5 years, so on, you're going to look back at this moment and be like, wow, that was just the first stepping stone of something that was so much more to come ahead.
Yeah. I that's how I'm trying to look at things now, you know? It is from the 5 year, the 10 year, even when working on a project and it being as honest as it can be now, like the 50-year perspective. If I'm lucky enough to be touring the world in 50 years or have some residency in Vegas or whatever I end up doing, like, I hope I'm performing Fission for the rest of my life, you know? But I guess in that, Lauren and I were catching up recently. Just so funny that 2-3 weeks before the album comes out, we're like, like, where do we go for the next one? And she called and she was just like, I think you guys should start thinking about it. And Kissiko almost hung up on her because he was like, absolutely the fuck not. Like, we need a break.
We're barely out the other end.
Absolutely not. I cannot think about the next project. But the truth is, I am thinking about it, right? And her and I had a pretty good conversation about what's next. And if I was like, if we're having this conversation, that must mean that we're ready to let go of birds. But then that made me reflect on birds itself and the question, right? Do you see the birds too? And not to take away from anything, because I really think I did what I set out to do with that. But I was like, what a naive question to ask. When I ask, do you see the birds too? For me, for years, people have been saying, look at how much you've grown. Look at your maturity. Look at how much you've healed. Look at how much you've let go of things. We're so proud of you. And I think birds always symbolized that, It was always a symbol of this growth, that this freedom, this wanting to move forward. And I ask this question, like, do you see that too? Do you see me healing? On some level, I feel like I'm asking my fans, I'm asking the world, like, everyone's saying this, do you see that in me too? And then I think in so many ways I'm asking myself that, and I'm like, do I really see this? Is this really happening? I think I'm asking people to look within themselves, and I'm like, do you see that for yourself too? But as, my mental health ebbs and flows, I think I'm also so full of shit. And I think sometimes when I feel like I don't actually see them, I'm like, am I asking people, because I'm so insecure in myself, that I need the validation from everyone to tell me that I've grown and tell me that I've become a better person? And when I'm really in a dark place, I think, am I just lying to the world? And am I asking people to see something that doesn't exist? Am I asking them to hallucinate and see these metaphorical birds? And the album always fucked with me because it always took such different meanings. And depending on where I'm at in my life, I think a couple weeks before the album, I was like, I don't see the birds. And on a day like today, I'm like, I think I'm getting there. I think I might see them. And when I reflect on it, and when I think about the next album and all that, I think, what a naive question, because of course 22-year-old me thought that healing and being healed was a destination and not a lifelong journey. I think that's me reflecting on this now, where I could do all the fucking work in the world, and God forbid tomorrow I lose someone really important to me. I go through some tragic life event, the world goes through something horrible, and I'm just gonna go right back to a shitty place, And I think it's just about, am I at a place where I'm coping with this better than I have before?
Yeah.
I think it's about the progress you make as a person. And in that way, it's like, no, it's not like, oh, I'm healed. Your life was never meant to be a punishment. We're good. And from here on, we're in a great fucking place. Yeah, it's not linear, is what I've learned. It's an uphill battle.
Yeah.
For some people, it's worse. And I think it's just about the effort, And that's where I think I fall now, where the world's hearing it for the first time. But for me, these are the last 2 years for me, or 26 months for me. I'm not asking the world anymore to tell me if I've become a better person. I'm not asking people to give me validation as much as I need it. And we were talking about this last night. I do think I'm like a, pathological people pleaser. Like, I do think I need everyone to like me. I'm accepting my humanity in all of it.
Good.
And giving myself grace more than I have before. And I think, at least I tried to make the album feel that way, where people could give themselves a little bit of grace.
Yeah.
And I see that being my role in their lives, my relationship with them going forward.
I think that's the beauty on not only titling the album as a question, but actually starting the album with a question. Breathing, is that what you call healing? You know, you go straight in with that. And when I listened for the first time, I didn't initially take that as you asking anybody else. I think I always took that as you asking yourself. And to what you say about this being a journey that you're going to be on probably for the rest of your life, I think it gives you a really beautiful thing to always go back to, and you can ask that question no matter what point you're at in your life. You know, what was the decision to start Fission in that way, to start the album in that way, to just continue with that line of just asking a question, you know, and really just making yourself present?
I feel like if we study my discography, there's an arc that I always go for, and it's always honest, but it is, to me, predictable, where, you know, this is where we're at, we're going through this challenge, we hit this low, and it's like, where do we go from there? And because I tried to force this album, you know, from February 2023 to September 2023, I was trying so hard to, okay, we're gonna make this. We didn't even have the title. We didn't know anything. It was just AS5. It was like, okay, I knew that this struggle was gonna be a part of it, and I think the natural thing was, this is my life unmedicated. This is what I go through, and like we end at the point of fission. I allowed myself to live a little bit more, to realize that for the first time, I think we should start at the point of medication.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think we should start at this place that opens with uncertainty, you know? You think about fission and fusion and how they're metaphors, right? They're supposed to represent, you know, the act of nuclear fission, the act of something being so volatile to then becoming fused, right? To then becoming interlinked. And in so many ways, I think you expect fission to be this tragic, gut-wrenching song that's like, this is him at his lowest, and we're gonna get to fusion, which is him finally at a place of peace. And I was like, well, that's just not true. You know, I think there's a lot of optimism going into something like that. It's scary, and it's like, but you know what? I'm making a step towards wanting better for myself.
You're allowing the idea into your life.
You're allowing the idea into your life. But the nuance is there from the beginning, you know? I think it's one of my favorite decisions is that the first line on the album is this what you call healing? Because that's how this whole process has felt. You know, you almost get sold on this idea that, you know, I'm gonna make a decision to get better, and I'm gonna, everything's gonna be fixed. And for me to start that and start to lose my emotional bandwidth, my emotional range, and to start becoming a version of myself that felt like I'm just watching my life from this third person perspective. I'm boxed out of the person I used to be. I feel, not to quote my own lyrics, but I feel like the shell of who I was.
Yeah.
It was really important to me that we started the album on that note. And with that being said, there's something so bittersweet about that song, but going back to Codex and going back to the voices in my head, you know, that's like a line that I reference a lot. That's like a theme I go back to a lot. And again, that was a time where I was bipolar and I couldn't, I was told that I wasn't, and I was struggling with that. And there's a song called Mania, right? Like how much more on the nose could it be? And to me, this was such a callback to that, to be able to say, yeah, I think that the voices are gone. Do I finally get to move on? You know, and like when you think about Fission, you feel how, hopefully, like how euphoric it is and how cathartic it is. And it's like, how are we starting this project at this place? Where the fuck do we go from here? But again, it's been a lot of reflecting for me, you know, these last 4 months since we've like mastered the album and it's been sent off. I've been listening to it, and I'd written something down that why is a song about healing and saying you're letting go and saying that you're moving to a better place, why is there a 2-minute orchestral outro that goes completely off grid? Just gets louder, it gets bigger. There's a string section, there's a brass section that just gets massive. You know, it's so grandiose. And yes, I love Creed.
Extremely bold choice also.
It's a and I have to think more about originally why that was my intention, but the only way I can see it now is, isn't it kind of ironic that I have to scream at the top of my lungs on a song like that hey, I'm doing better. Look at me, I'm moving on. I'm like, trust me, I'm healing. Why is that? Why is it so grandiose? Why did it need to be that? And to me, that tells me everything about the place I was in.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
and that to me, that tells me everything about why the album's called what it's called. Both things can be true. You know, that's something Michael used to say a lot to me very early on. He was one of the first people to hear the early versions of the album and the demos, and, you know, I'd play him like 14, 15, 20 songs, and half of them he'd be like, I don't care for these, but he's like, Fission, you know, and like,
Yeah.
Fission was one that like really, really moved him very early on. I remember it moved him, and he was like, this one is special. Like, I knew he felt like that was one of those ones in my catalog, and I try to articulate things to him because we're deciding and trying to build out what the visuals of this album look like and where we're supposed to go. And, you know, his USC brain comes up with, you know, like the thesis, and he's able to articulate it in a way that's very different than how I would say it. And one thing he kept coming back to is that two things can be true. You know, maybe all of it is, maybe none of it is, and maybe it doesn't matter. And in that way, we can sit here and dissect Fission for what it might be or what I might be seeing it as now, or maybe it doesn't fucking matter, you know? Maybe it just served its purpose as a song, but also as the beginning of the story. And I hope it did.
Yeah, I think the point that you've made a few times in that, in just describing what it's meant to do, not only for the album, but for what it was doing for you at that point in your life when it was being created, is establishing this narrative structure, which is something that I said to you when we spoke about Love Letter, that it felt that you were going into these projects with a very cinematic mindset, which was what really separates these two projects from your previous work. And obviously in that, on both projects, it's very obvious that you love movies. We speak about movies all the time.
We love movies.
You know, you pull so many references.
Our Letterboxd, it goes crazy.
There we go. There's just so many reference points that you pull from, and it has a very classic cinematic structure in how you've put the album together, in, you know, creating this, let's not say problem, but, you know, opening with something that needs to be resolved, and you move through that really succinctly throughout the album. And I think by beginning with questioning, you allow that to breathe throughout and to develop and to build. And I think without Fission being what it is, that would probably like be impossible. I don't think you'd be able to have that. And I think as well, by throwing in that big section with no vocals, you're setting the bar for what it's going to be, and you're kind of just preparing people for the journey you're going to take them on. Because I heard that for the first time, I thought like, whoa, this is like so left field from what you usually do. I was like, this is an incredibly bold choice. And part of me may be worried that that might scare people off. Did you ever have that fear that people, you know, might be like, whoa, back up. What are we doing right now?
100%. It's the scariest thing. But it's all about the risks, right? Like, I have so much I could say about this, but especially like my roots in music, you know, coming from a specific pocket of R&B, of trap soul, you know, there's a lot of beauty in that genre. Those are the albums we've been listening to the last couple of days, and they've raised me entirely. I have watched a lot of artists in that space, and with all due respect to them, stay in the same box.
Yeah.
You know, find the ceiling and stay there. Because, and I hear it when I talk to people that it's predictable. They know what works. It becomes formulaic. Not to take away the emotion and the art behind it, but it does become formulaic. And when you have a fan base that loves you for a sound, it's like, well, let's replicate that. And when you have a song that's like a hit that exists in this subculture, why don't we do part 2 of that, right? Why don't we do part 3 of that? Why doesn't every album sound the same? And I think that idea to me was bullshit from the very beginning. It's all about evolution to me. You know, my favorite artists are the ones that have evolved, and we've been able to watch that through their careers. And not every album is our favorite, and I like that happens, but I always respect the ambition, right? The attempt. Love Letter, I think I truly felt like I had nothing to lose. Again, it came out of so much anger that I was like, I want to make one of the best things that exists in this subgenre and then leave it for good, you know? And that's probably explains so much of the burnout that we felt after. But with Birds, it was like there was nothing to prove to anyone anymore except ourselves, you know? It was just, we always say like we won't start the next one until we find the next challenge, you know? Because if that doesn't exist, then great. Right now I can work on a bunch of demos and we can put that out and they're just gonna sound Birds adjacent, you know? And it's, to me, that's not worth going into. I don't want to create the story unless it's something so real, something so tangible for my fans. I want them to feel that, okay, he left for 2 years. That's the scariest part, right? To leave for the longest I've ever left. To come back 26 months later, people have every right to say, fuck you, I cannot believe this is why you made us wait 2 years. You know, people have every right to be disappointed, to hate the album. But the most beautiful thing about Thursday night when it came out, Friday, Saturday, I was so ready to crash the fuck out. I was so ready to just go through it and read, you know, people being upset. And all I took away from the overwhelming amount of love was that people understood for the first time why I needed to take that long, you know? And that comes with those risks, and that comes with making bold choices. Kisiko and I, for months, honestly more him than me, was like, I don't think we need to do the big cinematic sounds anymore. You know, we just wrote acoustic songs for months. You know, he was like, I think we know what we did it on Love Letter. I don't think we need the synths, we don't need the... And I was like, I respect it. That was in April, and come September, we got right back to it, and shit started sounding so fucking massive. And I was like, I don't think we need to shy away from that, you know? I think we're growing as artists, and like, we're finding our lane in music, you know? I want to come back every year or 2 or 3 or 4, and people are like, well, thank God Aaryan's back. Like, he occupies this place in my heart and this place in music that nobody else touches. And that just gets to be my special little bubble in the great history books of music. That's all I want out of this, you know? And cinema is a huge part of that. Falling in love with film. Honestly, like, I love Michael because I love him as a friend, but I think we connect on so many levels because we both have this like shared love for that and shared love for that medium. And so many of my best friends live in that world, and it all influences the project. You know, we all love watching movies. We all bond over that. We bond over scores, and they influence the project, you know? And part of all of the shit I say about being honest and authentic is embracing that cinema plays such a huge role in my life.
Yeah.
It plays such a huge role in my art, in the way I tell stories. Why would I run from that, you know? And if anything, it's that I think to me, my personal challenge is what I choose to write about, how I choose to write it, how we go about producing it. If I come back 2 years later and I sound like I'm in the same place I was on the last project, I would feel like I failed myself. And I would feel like I failed my fans. Because everybody is going through their journey. We're all growing up together. Granted, there's always new people that are coming in. There's always new people that are discovering the older music.
Yeah, of course.
There's people that always miss the older music. And like, it always exists for them there. But if I'm growing as a person, and I believe that my fans are, I have to, at the least out of respect, I have to take that leap forward and try to come at it from this angle that I haven't been able to before. I have to dig even deeper. I have to, and if I haven't matured in that way, then honestly that's a bigger conversation I need to have with myself, that why am I still thinking and behaving like I was 2 or 3 years ago?
Yeah.
I've lived so much more life. I've gone through more things. I have to push myself that much further and fucking pray that people appreciate that, and like, God bless if they do love it, you know? And
I think they will appreciate that, and I think also you'll really learn to appreciate that within yourself as well. And I think all of those feelings and the sentiments that you're carrying, I think you articulated that really well with Strings. I think that feeling of letting go of fear and allowing yourself to just embrace what it is you want to do, who you want to be, what sound you want to create. I think all of that came into that track, and you carried that forward throughout the project. I think it sits in there so eloquently. I think you did, you know, it was masterful to be able
Thanks.
to take all those feelings and just leave them there.
thank you.
And then people do with those what they need to do with them. I think as well, that's probably why, you know, you had that fear of what people were going to feel that then didn't come. I think because you laid it all on the plate very quickly.
Yeah.
And you said, this is what this is going to be, and this is why I need to do this for myself.
Yeah.
You know, and that just carried forward. I think it's a really powerful track in that way.
Thank
Strings.
you. Thank you. I you know, it has that place on the track list for so many reasons. You know, it was sequenced very intentionally, but Strings, I think, speaks so much to my journey as an artist. You know, I'm 24 now, This is my 10th year doing this, you know. I dropped out at 15. Like, this is 10 years of me making music, and we could have a whole other interview talking about what that was like, but so much shit that I've gone through in the last decade. So many dreams people have sold me. You know, so many people that take advantage of you when you're a kid on your own in a pretty filthy industry. You know, as much as you can find the beautiful people, everyone knows how
we see its underbelly.
How tough it is on younger people, especially on kids. And I've had my fair share of that, and all of that while being a teenager and wearing a mask because being brown and 15, 16, people weren't ready for that. And all people could focus on was the fact that I was brown. And all of the attention just goes there when it's like, but the music.
Yeah.
And I put a mask on, and unfortunately it validates every insecurity that I had, because the same music is now starting to resonate with people.
Yeah.
People don't know if I'm Indian or Arabic or black, and I have braids, and you know, that's like, there was so much I had to go through at a very young age that very much has shaped me into the person I am now and the person I'm becoming. But the one thing that has been consistent, and to this day is consistent, is that I'm a walking identity crisis. You know, just being an Indian kid, born and raised in LA. Everyone asks you to fit in one place or another. You know, I was too American for my Indian friends. I was too Indian for my American friends. I left school and in the music business. Like, I was actually telling someone last night that I was like, I just got my hair done. And I was like, I went blonde because I was just like going through a fucking depressive episode, and I was like, run it, like just let's just bleach it. And I always wanted to, and I kind of love being blonde. Like, it's been a fun couple years, and I probably see myself doing it for a while. But what's really fucked up is I've noticed people treating me differently. You know, I used to walk into rooms, same music, same attitude towards things, same love for the artistry, and it was always like, oh, like, who are you writing for? You know, who are you producing for? I was like, no, it's me. This is your voice. This is your this is your art. And I went blonde because I wanted to, but now it's like being blonde and wearing clothes that I wear and having jewelry, and all of a sudden it's like, oh no, that's the artist that's coming in. And I'm like, it's so fucking sad that just because people haven't seen someone who looks like me before, they can't fathom the idea. It's like, I know people don't mean any harm, but it's condescending.
Of course it is.
You know, it's backhanded. And that is one of so many things that has made me grow up feeling like I don't know where I belong. I don't know my place in the world. The industry constantly wants me to push me towards, well, you should make Indian music because you're Indian, you know? Or you should completely lean away from it and, like, don't even say that you are. And a song like that is, it's like, I used to have strings, but now I'm free. Fuck what everyone has to say. You know, truly, from the bottom of my heart, and I mean that with so much love, fuck what everyone has to say. You know, I finally, I feel like I found my purpose. I feel like I've really found my sound. I'm scared, but I'm definitely not scared to make the decisions that I do. I dress and present myself in a way that feels like who I am right now at 24. I feel like I have nothing to lose, you know? There's something so liberating about it. Where it's like I'm not trying to be what anyone wants me to be anymore. The only thing I ever try to be is what I feel my fans need me to be in their lives. That is it. Otherwise, I feel free in a way that I haven't before, you know? And the rest of the album really starts to poke at that and ask if I am as free as I think I am. But the truth in a song like that, the undeniable truth is, yes, I will grow up having an identity crisis. I will be in my 30s and 40s and still be trying to find the man I want to be and how I want to represent, you know, my culture. But I finally feel like I'm becoming the person I'm supposed to be.
That acceptance probably feels really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, it's something I don't take for granted because I think I'm just now feeling that way. You know?
I definitely think you carry it forward once you come out of Strings as well. You know, obviously you spoke to how important solo travel was for you to help you shift perspective and, you know, just start building this stronger idea of who you are and what you can take on in life and how you're going to start navigating through different challenges. What was the process while you were undergoing that travel, like while you were in the thick of it, to then creating Budapest and Vienna?
Vienna, we started in like a week before A Love Letter to LA came out, and Kissico started playing like this riff he had on the acoustic guitar, and I think immediately we were like, this feels undeniable. And the first melody that came out for me was what ended up being the hook. And I think the solo travel played a big role in all of that because, you know, part of what I was talking about, you know, day 8, day 9, day 10, I don't know what 10 days of loneliness does. And I went to Vienna, I went to Budapest, and I was in completely different places with, you know, the girls in my life at that time. And Budapest was written sitting by that window, which ended up being the artwork that Harut painted. And that's how I felt in that moment, you know, that was someone that takes advantage of me when I'm at my most vulnerable. And Vienna was this is probably one of the hardest records I've ever had to make. I think we ended up some 60 versions into it by the end. And it's because we knew that it was going to be this pop song. I knew that Vienna was supposed to be the song that it ended up becoming, but finding that was so tricky because it's like you don't want to force something that's just so delicate to become this like fun dance record.
Yeah.
At the same time, if you're gonna make a fun dance record, you have to do it right, and you have to find a way to, at least for me, keep people on their toes, which is why we did an acoustic version, we did a fully synth version, we did so many versions of the drums. And I think when we finally got to a place where we kind of knew how it was gonna go, the only part of it that wasn't done was my writing. You know, that song took 1.5 years to finish, and you would think that, you know, a song like that is like easier to finish because it's easier to listen to.
On the surface. Yeah.
And it's the complete opposite because I never want to make songs, even if they're pop songs. I don't want them to not have substance. If anything, I think it's like Mike Posner, you know, I Took a Pill in Ibiza, like that's an incredibly well-written record, and we just know the Sieb remix, that's just like the vibe we all dance to. If you listen to the acoustic version of it, it's fucking tragic.
Yeah, there's a lot of pain in that track. Yeah.
And that's how I went about Intoxicated. That's how I went about Vienna. you know, I wanted to like have this feeling of yearning, you know, this almost childlike, this fucking adolescent love where, you know, it's always your first love where like when you get your heart broken, you're like, I'd die for you. Like I don't want to feel this for you, but I do. And what's tricky for me was I wasn't in a place like that in my life. And I was trying to balance so many things writing a song like that, because I'm thinking about people who aren't native English speakers, and phonetically can they grasp onto the words, because I want this to transcend language in that way. But for the people who are listening to it, who do understand the lyrics, I think the song should be flipped, and I think you should be able to maybe understand it on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I just had to live more life to honestly be on the other side of that song and to feel like somebody felt that for me, you know? And if I was to write it from her perspective, how would I go about that? Because I've been in that place and I know that feeling. To then be on the other side of it, that's where Budapest, Vienna, Vantage Point kind of live in this, it's unintentional, but they live in this little block where for 3 songs we kind of just go into my love life for a bit and how fucked up it's been for the last couple of years. And I always think of them, they're from such different perspectives, but the through line is, it's about letting go, right? Budapest, I need to let go of someone that knows how to find me at my weakest. Vienna is about needing to let go of something but not being able to, something that's so toxic for you. It's like a relationship, it's about addiction. And Vantage Point being about seeing something from this perspective that someone else can't, and knowing that we've already lost this war.
Yeah.
And the longer we hold on to it, the harder we will crash and burn, you know? And they to me, that's where I think you really start to feel the nuance on the album, because strings feel so free, and then we kind of nosedive right into how complicated things actually have been.
Yeah.
You know?
And then I think you then kind of set the tone for what's then to follow, because you've had this idea of freedom, like opening the door to that freedom. What might that look like? But then you sit in the reality of everything, and I think that's when the conflict starts to build again, the tension starts to build. You know, we go from love is violence forward, interlinked, and when we do then get to death, this tension's at like an all-time high. That was another point in the album for me, like when I first listened to Fission, it was like, this is a really bold move again to just have this really tense piece of music that it leaves you on edge. It almost feels like horrific in a way, you know, you feel quite scared, and it's like, whoa, where are we going from here? You know, we started this journey with freedom, and now we're back into this really tense feeling. Like,
yeah.
What was that?
I think we do start at this point of freedom, and I want the rest of the album to feel like what was it worth, you know? What really is the point of freedom if you don't know where to go anymore, you know? And we experienced that in my love life, and Interlinked is supposed to be this moment of feeling the medication kick in for the first time and feeling like something's changing, and I don't know what it is, and I don't know if this is what I wanted. And now I'm become death, you know, obviously quoting Oppenheimer. If I can take a step back, I knew Fusion was the bookend, and I always felt like there was a piece that was missing. And I kind of set this, like, I kind of knew You know, again, it's like goes back to the scores. Like, I was watching House of the Dragon, and Ramin Djawadi's score on that is just so fucking incredible. And I kind of use that as like this temp score as like a reference point of like, I want something that feels this menacing, this disturbing, because that is the point of like, you don't come back from this, you know? There is this, it was inevitable, but there is this change that we don't get to go back from here. And, you know, I knew I wanted it to be a score. I knew it was a bold choice to have one song stand alone as a score. I know I've done Conspirators and that too, but this really like had to stand on its own legs. And there were some, you know, like I've worked with Johan on Love Letter, and Johan is, you know, one of the most like talented people I know, and someone that you would instantly think of when you're like, okay, I want to do strings, you know, who's the guy who's classically trained. And you know, my best friend Omer and I were chatting about this, and his perspective was, if you really are the artist that you think you are, or the artist you want to be, you do this. You figure out how to do it. I don't know how to write sheet music. I'm
It's
way,
a big challenge
I'm
to
in
set.
over my head. And I thought what was really interesting to me was the idea of a motif, you know, and I hadn't played with that before, but all my, you know, I have every good score really, it has a motif in it. And if I thought about the motif of the album, the heart of the album, it was Fission, you know? The refrain hook in Fission has this melody that we all know and love, and we all sing at like our parties, or like I know the place Fission holds in everyone's heart. And I thought there was something really poetic and fucked up about taking the motif from Fission, learning how to make minor harmonic chords out of them, and then creating sheet music. And I worked with session players. I orchestrated that record to bring back some familiarity from a song that felt like this is how we start our journey. And it's haunting that you're listening to something that you love and it sounds so terrifying because it's leading you into what's inevitable, and that's fusion.
Yeah, it's heavy in a way because it's so big, but I think it's something that's also really important because of what comes after it, which obviously is Skies, which I think you have to earn. That was something that had to be earned because it's beautiful, but it's also something that's really painful. It's something that you really have to feel, and it's, you know, you gave a lot of people the words they needed to feel something that's never easy to feel. It's something that we've spoken about so many times, and a conversation that never gets easier to have.
No.
And that's the power of that song, and you know, you do really earn it by going through that fear and coming into that. And I mean, that's what loss is. It's, you know, we fear death all the time, and then we then have to feel what that is. We have to feel that grief, and Skies gives us that opportunity.
Skies is a really important record to me, as I know it is to you. And it came, you know, the night after Bella died. Rhea and I came back home, and we brought our mom back because we didn't want her to be at her place without Bella. And you know, I remember it so vividly because fucking the poetic timing of it, that like Love Is Violence was releasing that night, and it just felt horrible. It felt so horrible to come back with a single and just be going through this thing that like I wasn't prepared to feel. And I remember Rhea and I were on the roof, and the sky kind of looked like the painting, like the album artwork, and it was raining through it, and the sun was still shining through it, and she was like, Bella, like, the skies cried for you. And I just, like, I broke down, and I knew that there was something really profound there.
Yeah.
That I needed to find. And within, like, the next day, I had a very rough version of it without many lyrics, and I played it for my mom and Rhea, and I was like, I think I want to make something for her, and I want to, this is what I have, and I played it for you last night, and the three of us were just sobbing, and as I continued writing that song, which was never an easy song to write, it was one that we had to dodge a lot. Like, everyone was so delicate. You know, we listened to all these songs a million times, and mixes and editing and whatever, and Skies was one that everyone knew was so delicate that the jokes stopped in the room. You know, no more fucking around. Let's not listen to it 10 million times. Like, this is something that's really sensitive, and we need to, like, treat her as such. And as I continued writing it, and it had to be touch and go, because it was, you know, even talking about it right now is tough. You know, you were on my mind a lot, and, like, I know that you had just gone through losing your best friend, and I wanted Skies to be for you what it was for me and what it is for me. And as I kept writing, we just saw a lot of loss around us, you know. Yeah. And talking to Rhea last night, and her sending it to her friend that she lost to his mom. Yeah. You know, and I thought about it, like, this is something forever for people to have when they go through that in their lives. And unfortunately, I think I'll revisit that song when I lose people in my life. And that's why I came to you in Manchester. And it was over the summer, and I was like, the song isn't ready yet, but I want you to know it's really special to me, and I know I hope it's that for you. And your reaction to it, like, obviously I hugged you, and, like, I wanted you to know how much I love you, but I was able to comfort you as a friend, and I was also able to get that back from you, that this is what this song's supposed to be.
Absolutely.
And in so many ways, this is what the album's supposed to be. You know?
That's the healing that you question at the top end, that you question not only for yourself, but allow people to question for themselves. It's like you set that bar. That's the question you're always going to come back to, is this healing? But then you also have this reference point to feel, in a big way, in a huge way. Really difficult things also. You know, I think that's what you have to remember and really take from that, especially when you've shared it with so many people and now the world has it, that they're going to be able to use that in that same way. And I think you need to really appreciate what a powerful piece of music you've created. And then you get to heal from that again in a really poetic way with Your Life's Never Meant to Be a Punishment, which is a incredible way to close it out after that big drop, to then have so much acceptance and pick those pieces back up.
You know, I thought a lot about earning moments on this song, earning songs on this record, and I knew where Fusion had to be, and I knew Fusion had to be this moment of accepting that this new life is maybe more morbid than how I felt before. I knew Skies was this moment of grief and loss and being able to get past, you know, maybe going through all of the stages of grief in one and then being able to, like, let them go. And Punishment, which had to be where I left people on this album. And so much thought went into, you're about to listen to so many ballads back to back. And this might just be the same arc you go through with any of my albums, where we were here and now it's just all gone downhill from here. It's just pain and misery for the next however long, right? And when we talk about the arc of the album, starting at Fission was such a choice, but with any good movie, we don't end on our climax. And I realized that Fusion was our climax, which meant we needed our resolution. And after, you know, saying, when I find God, I'll tell him he's wrong, to hit that low, you somehow go even lower with Skies, but in a completely different way, you know? In a way that's like, I think I have to let go. This whole album's been about wanting to let go, and it's like, in a completely different way, I think I have to. And I realistically, at that point, we're probably in tears, and that felt like the perfect time to introduce Punishment, which was that message, and which was that, like, if you went through this journey, and if you're going through this journey, just the title in itself, like, you need to remember that your life was never meant to be a punishment. And the song came out, and it was just so sad seeing so many people reach out to me. It's like, well, then why does my life feel like it was, you know? And I don't have the answer to that, because I feel that all the time, but it's not, you know? And you know, that, like, that poem, because I love Interstellar, you know, Rage Against the Dying of the Light. I meant it to rage against the dying of the light. Like, that's how we live to fight another day, you know? I think one of my favorite things about that is being able to tell someone that, like, don't go back to where you don't belong. The sun will shine on you again tomorrow. I've never said something like that. And because I felt like I had to say that to myself, to talk about the sun shining on you after saying the skies cried for you, I hope people finished the album and felt, I hope they took what they needed to from it. You know, I really hope they got that catharsis, and you could listen to it and be like, he's the most fucked up he's ever been. This guy is not okay. And that's completely valid. That's completely valid, because there is truth to that.
Yeah.
But you can also be like, I'm really proud of his journey, and there's truth to that too.
From those questions that you opened with to getting to that point, do you think you earned or even just walked into or reached the closure that maybe you deserved or that you wanted from the album? Or even just from those feelings?
I think so. Like, I was with you yesterday, and, you know, a situation came up, and we talked so much about what it means to be a man, and what it means to be a decent human being. And I know younger me was so hot-headed, and I had this temper, and the world tries to bring out this really nasty side in you, and you're like a male role model I have in my life. You're just in general a role model I have in my life. That the way we had that conversation, and the way I'm looking for forgiveness in my heart, and I'm trying to have empathy when I feel like I'm just losing emotion in my life. I think it speaks a lot to, I think what I set out to do as a person, and the album I set out to make, like, having that conversation last night, I was like, I do feel like I do feel like I got there, you know? Right now, like, I do feel like I see the birds. And tomorrow I'll wake up and I'll feel like I don't, you know? And that's just part of it, but it's still hard to process that the world has this album. But I'm really proud of what I've done as an artist, as a person, as to the people in my life, to the fans that love and adore me and would die for me. I hope I made them proud, and I'll just keep trying to do better, because that's all I can do, you know?
I feel like you've set the runway with what your forward intentions are, and it fills me personally with so much pride and so much happiness that you've got yourself towards that point. But now, where do you take that? You know, obviously you know that this is a journey that's gonna follow you through life, that you're gonna be chasing through life. But what do you, if you can, if this is even possible, what do you want that end result to be? What do you want that legacy to be that you leave at the end of it all?
My parents are big philanthropists, and the values they've instilled in me, the way I look at my place in the world, is that I'm here to give everything I have back to the world, you know? And it's so easy to get caught up in wanting all these things for yourself, and as I've been lucky enough to get them, I realize that I'm proud of myself and we've hit those moments, but I just want to give back, you know? And I talk a lot about how I feel like I found my purpose, and I think to me Birds was about finding my purpose. I think it was the album that comes from the person who found their purpose. When I look at where I'm at now and where I think I'm going, is what's my responsibility, you know? It is my honor to be in the position that I'm in. It's a privilege. What I get to be for my fans, what I get to be in the world. A lot of artists don't think that way, you know. They very much think they deserve it all, that very entitled, you know, people just tend to do that. And it's like, you have to remember that all of this can go away in a second. The world doesn't owe you shit. And you be good to I used to say you be good to people and people will be good to you, but it's like, I don't look for that exchange. I just care to be good to people. And with all of that, I do believe that it's time for me to understand the responsibility that I have. And I hope I can do right by the world, you know. I hope I can make people proud, and I hope my legacy is one that people remember for a long time.
Extremely powerful, man. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
Thank you, dude. Thanks for being all the way out here. Can't believe you go back tomorrow. Thank you for being a part of this. Like, I really wouldn't want to do this with anyone else, and I really feel like we can make this our tradition, you know.
For real.
It's a good excuse for us to hang out.
It feels so special, you know, even the fact that we had it as like such a random drunken conversation to kickstart the year.
Yeah.
It was like, are we gonna do this?
Yeah.
And then to be here, it's been really humbling actually, and it's given me a lot of time to collect my own thoughts. I think even just the time we've had just driving around and, you know, like the conversations yesterday, I think we've really just put a lot of things in some chips in order. And that feels really positive to take forward into the next part of the year.
I love you, dude.
Love
Thank
you too, man.
All right. Oh, I'm shivering. No, it's fucking cold as shit out here.
Let the world have it.
Yeah, let the world have it.